Okay, we're gonna start with this picture here. So who are these people?
This is my grandpa, my dad's father, and this is Elaine's dad. He was probably 4 years old. And this is Amina Beeler Helbling. I never learned to know her. She died in 1913.
Now
And Grandpa Helbling died in 1938 in August.
Okay. This is the grandpa that was married 4 times?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
He was married in first wife in Russia, and then the baby childbirth, the mother died, and then the baby died, and then he got married to Amina Beeler. And they had 6 boys and 3 girls, and all the girls died. The boys all survived.
How did the girls die?
I don't know, was it Rh, negative blood or whatever? The last one died at Mandan, at St. Anthony. She's buried at St. Anthony, Mary Eva.
And how did she die?
Strangulation of the intestines.
Mm-hmm. And then
she had operation and she couldn't get over it. She was very heavy. She was only 56 years old.
And then he remarried again?
Mm-hmm. Then he married this Mrs. From Wilton. What was her name? I mentioned it a while ago. Let's see, her name was, and the third wife was, I can't think of her name right now. I mentioned it a while ago.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We can.
Yeah, the second wife. And she died, she was, she got pneumonia or something. She was washing the kitchen, the ceiling of her kitchen, and something happened. She got sickened. She died November 1. She was buried in Mandan Christ the King Church. I mean St. Joseph Church years ago.
Did your grandfather...
Mrs. Fowle. Yeah, that was Mrs. Fowle, the second wife.
Did your grandfather have any children with her?
No, he was... The only family he raised was with the first wife. And then after Mrs. Fowle died, he got married to Mrs. Furter. Her husband died too, and he married her at 24. I knew her real well. When he died, she got married to a Mr. Hick, just so she had a home, and things were real bad those days. They were poor. The same clothes she had when she was married to him, she still had them when she was married to Mr. Hick, and they were not threadbare already. They had no money to buy clothes those days.
So this was your uncle then, right?
And that's Elaine's dad. Yeah, he used to run he was the engineer for our threshing crew. Yeah, the big tractor we had. Yeah, he came out every fall, and my dad ran the separator, and he ran the engine. Those days you had to be there just like steam. Keep on adding gasoline every so often so they wouldn't run out of gas and everything. Where today you can set a tractor down, let them work all day without worrying about refueling.
So were you close to him when you were growing up? Were you close to him when you were growing up?
Yeah, he came out. And then he was a cement man also. He built our smokehouse. That's about the last projects he had out there. In the 60s, he came out and he built a new smokehouse for us. It was out of cement blocks.
And what was his name?
Valentine the third. This is Valentine the second. His dad was born in 1854. That was Valentine the first. 1825, I mean. Second Valentine was born in 1854, and the third one was born in 1904, I think.
Okay, we'll go to the next picture here. Let's see. Oops, hold on. Okay.
That's my uncle. And this was my dad's steam engine, the threshing machine. This is my dad's brother as a fireman here, Nicholas Helbling. That says on there probably. Nick Helbling.
So
and that was my dad's team of horses. They'd haul water to the steam engine to keep the steam engine water there to produce steam. That was very interesting, the steam engine. If we had that today, that'd be worth many, many dollars.
So when you were growing up, did you always have a tractor on the farm?
Tractor? In 1930, let's see, 34, 30. Let's see, I think my dad bought the first tractor in the 30s. Then in 40 we bought the rubber tire tractor. In 42 we bought a Minneapolis Moline on rubber. That's what we used to run that separator with later on. Before that we had a big old Twin City that run it. And before that we had that big Minneapolis that's in here, what Uncle Val run. I think it's the first page maybe, or it may be in here, I don't know.
So your first tractor, where did your dad get it from?
Oh, let's see, the steam engine, I don't know where he bought the steam engine. It was a Case engine, Case steamer. Where he bought that, probably from, there was Case dealers around those days. That was his very first tractor, the thrashing. They only used it for thrashing. And they used it to grade road for a while too, when they graded some roads. And then after that he bought that Minneapolis, that big one, at 3570 Minneapolis. And Uncle Val was the one that was the engineer for that tractor. Then he bought a Twin City. We had it a few years, and then we traded that for, and after rubber tires came in 1942, we bought the Minneapolis Moline rubber tire tractor that we used to thrash with. And now, then later on we only had one tractor to do all the work, where most farmers have 3 or 4 of them now to do the work.
How did that first tractor change farming for you?
Well, it was better in the hot weather. My dad would have 4 plows behind it, and he'd plow 20 acres on a real good day, where with horses you had to have a lot of people out there to plow 15 acres a day. I know he told me once he'd plow 7 acres a day with the 3-bottom plow with 8 horses, plow 7 acres a day, and that was quite a number of acres to turn over. Where with the tractors today, 25, 30 acres is nothing at all to plow.
When you first got the tractor, were you able to drive the tractor?
At harvest time, my dad took that older Minneapolis, what he bought back in the 30s, and he hooked the binder on it, and my brother drove it, and then I got to drive it too, but it was very hard to drive. Steering had so much slack in it, you had to turn so many times to keep it. When you turned a corner, you couldn't hardly get back in there, so you wouldn't tramp the crane down, run the crane down with your tractor when you were bindering. Where these tractors now, it's so much difference. It's just like the automobiles were those days.
You mentioned that a few years later you got your first tractor with rubber tires. How did that change? What was the difference between?
That was a wonderful design. What a change! You wouldn't believe it. Yeah, it runs so smooth, and you could go out there and plow. It didn't have air conditioning or a cab or anything, but you didn't worry about that. Everything else was, you could plow 20 acres just like that in a day, no problem.
Was it hard to get the rubber tire tractors? Was it expensive, or?
Yeah, we paid $1,600, which was big money. I think that tractor is pictured in here. Maybe it isn't. Yeah, $1,600 that time for a tractor. This is the farm where my grandpa grew up. My dad grew up there. The house isn't there no more. That's many years ago.
So when you were growing up, did you ever visit this farm?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they had weddings. When Uncle Henry lived there, they had 2 weddings in that house when his daughters got married. Mm-hmm. Then after that, he sold it when he moved out west, and Frank Gardner bought the farm.
How old were you when they had the weddings out there?
Oh, in 42, they had a wedding down there. So I was, let's see, 21, 31.
21?
21 years old. Mm-hmm.
So what was the wedding like?
Oh, they had it in the house. They ate, they cooked in that house. Where is the house now? That house was still there, rock house. Mm-hmm. I think so. I can't see it from my...
Yeah, that's the house right there.
Yeah, They had a lot of people there. It had probably about 75 people there. They cooked the meal. And the dance they had at St. Anthony. That's about 7-8 miles east of St. Anthony here. This is 8 miles west of St. Anthony. So they went to the hall at St. Anthony where they had the wedding dance at night. Mm-hmm.
What was a wedding dance like when you were...
Oh, the bride and the groom, they were still dressed in their wedding gowns, and they had the A dance and everything. And it's like a real wedding dance. Everybody seemed to enjoy it. And they stayed to the end.
So how much did your grandpa own this land, or did he homestead it? And
Yeah,
did
he
purchase-
homesteaded some of it. And then he had his sister come over, Mrs. Langang, so she homesteaded some northwest of there. And Uncle John, my grandpa's son, he moved, when he got married, he moved right a little bit east of this here, maybe a quarter mile east of this. And he had a little house there for a while. Then he bought some land further southeast of there. And Uncle Nick, Grandpa bought him a quarter about 4 miles north of this. And my dad was about 5 miles north of there, or 4 miles straight north is where he was. And my dad, he bought a quarter of prairie, but Grandpa had a quarter of cropland a mile east of there, northeast of there. And they farmed that together. And that steel bin they had there to put grain in is still on our farm today. The Butler bin they had back in those days to put grain in. That bin is still at our farm now. It was up on the other place a mile and a half north of there, where when they threshed, they'd put the grain in there in the wintertime. They'd take wagons and horses and haul it to town to the elevator from there. Everything was done with horses.
So how much land overall did your grandfather own? Do you know?
Well, he had, I think he must have had about, well, he had that 1 quarter he bought for Uncle Alfred, 2 quarters. Uncle Nick's was 3 quarters. He had about 6 quarters to start with. Grandpa the Helbling did. Then he had some Beeler land west of St. Anthony. I don't know how many acres there was. That was, I think, when his Amina died, she inherited that.
So when you were a young boy, did you enjoy visiting your grandpa?
Yeah, on the farm, I don't recall because he moved to town in 1917 or 18 already. 13, 14, I think in 14 or 15 he moved it. He was still on the farm when my folks got married in 1913. Grandpa Helbling and Amina Beeler was still there. Then she died, of course, at 14. Then he moved to town. We'd visit him in town.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What types of things would you do when you visited him?
Oh, he'd have a wonderful garden all the time, and we'd sit on the porch and he'd visit, and then me and my brother would go in the barn and pick up the eggs, and they had those glass eggs in the nest those days. I don't know what it was for. They said that it'll attract the hen to go and lay eggs in that nest. And we came out, we picked up the eggs, and then we brought those plastic eggs in too. And Grandma said, "Just go back in the nest again. They're there for a decoy for the hens to lay eggs in." So we put them back out again. We never heard of that before. We never used them at home, but they did in town. Must have been an old custom from the old country.
Okay. This one here. Helbling Bohm Bowser said?
I think that's when I got married.
Oh.
Rose and Jacob, as you say.
Yep, Miss Rosebohm, daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Jacob.
Mm-hmm.
So, how did you meet your wife?
Let's see. I think at New Salem, at the Casa Loma. Yeah, me and my cousin drove up there and we met her there. Her cousin, Leo Bender, said that's his cousin. Rose Boehm is his cousin. Their mothers were, his mother and Rose's mother were sisters. And I learned to know her then, and a couple of years later I got married to her, yeah.
And how long were you married?
40, we would have been married 50 years in 89, but in 80. She died in 88, in 89 we'd have been married 50 years.
How did she
98, I mean, not 89.
Oh.
49 to 99 is 50 years. She died in 88. She had got Alzheimer's. Her mother had it, and her sister had it, and her other sister had Alzheimer's. Then she had a massive stroke and died. And she got that and she lived another 8 days and then she passed away.
So she was from New Salem? Is that what you said that she was from?
West of Mandan she lived.
Okay, okay.
She put up all this. She put all this together here.
Did she? It's beautiful.
Yeah, we have a bunch of it at home from the BAME history and the Stein history. And this here, she did a wonderful job on this. And then my daughter helped too. She made the BAME history from all the BAMEs. This is my baptismal certificate, my mother's.
Holy
Mine.
Communion. Remember the first Holy Communion. 1931.
31, In 32 I got confirmed.
So tell us a little bit about confirmation. How was confirmation back then?
Well, we had to learn our religion, and they said the bishop will ask you all kinds of questions on confirmation day, but it wasn't that bad. They just told us that so we'd learn our catechism. But he did ask a few questions like they do nowadays, but I remember real well when they had that confirmation. And the sisters, they fixed a wonderful dinner for us after confirmation down at the parochial school. It was just, I didn't know we'd have good food like that in the parochial school. During the week, boarders just got the meals were very plain. But on that Sunday afternoon, that was a gourmet meal like they have at weddings when we had our confirmation. That was in 1932 I was confirmed, but in 31 I got my first Holy Communion.
And then over here, we have a birth certificate for you and your baptismal certificate. So when you were growing up, how important was religion to your family?
Quite important. Everybody, church Sundays, even if the roads were bad and no gravel roads or anything, boy, if one of the neighbors didn't make the church, everybody checked on and wondered what happened because they didn't get to church. And I remember my mother's brother said they'd get up at 4 a.m. and hitch the horses on the hay rack instead of the sled when there was no snow. They'd take big heavy coats and they'd go all the way to church, 6 miles. Do the chores first, and once in a while they drove to Mandan to church when there was no services at St. Anthony. Those days they drive all the way to St. Joe's at Mandan once in a while with horses. That was quite a trip in those days for horses. And cold pateo, they took rocks and heated them up the night before in the oven, put them in there, and they'd stay warm till they come back home again. My folks did that too when they went to town with the team. Put them in the oven the night before and they took them out. Next morning, you wrapped them in blankets and put them in the sled to keep their feet warm. It was the thing to do, I guess, to keep warm.
So when you would attend a church as a boy, what was a typical service like back then?
Very, very long. They had rosary. The kids had instructions when they were old enough. They'd go in the sister school there in a room and they had instructions for the catechism instructions up to the 4th, 5th, 6th grade, whatever. And the rest of them had to go to church and then they recited the rosary. And then after instructions and the rosary was over, then they'd start the Mass. Then the priest would have a sermon in German and in English. And then after that they had benediction, and services were 2 hours every Sunday, at least 2 hours. Hot or cold sometimes it was so warm like today, there was no air conditioning in the church. It was very warm, but people put up with it.
Were the services in German or were they in English?
German and English. First, for the old German people that they preferred their German language to be preached in the sermon, and then after that, Father Andrew would preach in English so the younger generation could understand what's going on.
How about Christmas time? How would the church celebrate Christmas?
Oh, they had midnight mass, and everybody went to midnight mass. We'd get to stay home, but the older ones would go along. They'd come home at 2 in the morning then with the car, and the next day they'd go back again on Christmas Day. Have another Christmas services. And if you missed church on Christmas, that was a bad thing. They wanted you to go to church at Christmas. Anyway, especially my grandmother, she said you should always attend Mass on Christmas Day.
What about names days? Was that something that was celebrated?
That was very common. Yeah. Yeah, my uncle had a name's day of St. John's. That was right after Christmas. They'd go there all the time. Or the neighbor, there was John Eckroth, they'd go there. And on the 6th of January, they had St. Stephen's Day. Then they'd go to that name's day. And whenever there was a name's day, it was well attended. It was a big party for the neighbors all the time. And today you don't hear much of name's days no more.
How about birthdays? Was that something that you celebrated at all?
Yeah, sometimes, yeah, birthdays once in a while they had a big party. I know my uncle, when he had his birthday, my mother's uncle, they'd always go to their house. And they had probably 5, 6, 7, 8 couples there, or even 10 or more.
How about Easter?
Easter was another big celebration. Yeah, they had Holy Week, church Thursdays and Fridays, and then Sundays again on Easter Sunday. Then on Easter Monday, after Advent, then you could have Easter Monday dance. Then they had Easter Monday, all over they had the Easter Monday dance. At Flasher had an Easter Monday dance all the time. And later on at the Castle Loma Easter Monday, that was during Lent, you didn't dance. You weren't supposed to dance during Lent or Advent. And so Easter Monday was a big day all the time. Everybody went to the dance those days. There's the man that he lived on my grandpa's farm. When he got married, he took over my grandpa's farm. That was Henry, my dad's fourth brother. John and Pa and Uncle John, and then Uncle Henry, and then Uncle Nick and Uncle Val. There were 6 of them. Yeah, he was the one that stayed on the farm till he moved out west. He died, passed away too now. He had a very good memory. I talked to a man here a while ago, he's passed away now. He says, if your Uncle Henry was still here today, I'd sit down, he says, and I'd listen to him for 3 hours and write everything down because he remembers everything from back in the 1920s.
This here is your certificate of marriage?
This is
You and Rose?
That's right.
You were married October 25th, 1949?
My dad was married on October 24th, 1913.
So can you tell us a little bit about your wedding, what that was like?
Oh, it was a cool evening. My best man was Adam Bullinger, and my the bridesmaid was Rose's sister's daughter. That was Janice Gratz, I think, yeah. And Marvin was ring bearer, Marvin Ickroth. I forget now. Marvin was, I think he's the ring bearer. That was Monica's boy. And the wedding was at the country club in Mandan. Not a very big place, but they had quite a few people in there. They had dinner and supper and a dance there. And after the dance, let's see, we went to Rose's folks, and then we went to Black Hills for a short honeymoon, then went out to see Rose's sister in Geraldine, Montana. It was nice weather after that. It was cold that week, it was cold, but then the weather turned out real nice again. after that.
Do you remember what day of the week that was that you got married?
Friday, Tuesdays, always Tuesdays. Those days the weddings were always Tuesdays. And
Why?
now it's different. I don't know why. And you had to book ahead of time because most of the halls were always taken for Tuesdays. My sister Monica got married on a Tuesday at St. Anthony, and Matt got married on a Tuesday in November. And so that Tuesdays was the wedding days those days. The date for weddings those days. I don't know why, but that's the way it was.
Was alcohol served at weddings?
Yeah, so years ago it was home brew, but we didn't have no home brew at my wedding. They had, I think they bought the liquor and then the mixed drinks there. Downstairs, I think they bought it from Bill's Liquor. They brought a keg of beer down there. Bill's Liquor store brought it down there to the clubhouse, and then they had beer. They served beer all afternoon and in the evening. And then they poured some whiskey too. Must have. I don't know if it was. I don't think it was home brew mixed because I'm not sure, but I know they did have liquor there. And good meals, good meals. They fixed 2 good meals. They had hired a cook that cooked all the food for the wedding. And then they had midnight lunch and everything those days.
Midnight lunch, what's that?
Yeah. Snacks, more cookies, and made sandwiches again for the people that were there, left over from the dinner. Or they had extra meat. They bought some handmade sandwiches yet. They served midnight lunch. That was common those days for midnight lunch.
So was a wedding an all-day event back then?
10 o'clock in the morning was the wedding. Then by the time the sermon was over, 11:30 or 12, and then we'd have our dinner. Then at afternoon, about 1:30 or so, you'd go and have your wedding picture taken at the photographer. The bridegroom and the bridesmaid would go along, and the bride and the groom and the bridesmaid and your uncle or whatever, they called him, let's see, your godfather, yeah, he'd also go along sometimes he'd go along to when you have your picture taken.
Who was your godfather?
Uncle Ambrose, mother's brother. And my godmother was this lady here.
At your wedding, was there a a money dance, or
Wedding dance? Yeah, in the evening. Yeah, in the afternoon already. About 3 o'clock they started music after the dinner. Then after supper they played again till midnight. Wedding dances those days. And now they don't hardly start dancing till after supper when they have wedding dances at this day and age that I know of. Those days it was all day affair. At 2 o'clock they started to dance in the afternoon.
Well, is there anything else about your childhood or your life that you wanted to share with us today?
I think that's about it. I guess that would probably be about as much as I wanted to report in this.
We have one last question for you, and that is, why did you decide to participate today?
Elaine has been so nice. She's done so much for me, sent me information about the St. Anthony Cemetery. I don't know who she gets it from, where the unmarked graves are and everything. And we were down there once, and she asked me, and I figured I shouldn't turn her down for doing this here because she's always been so kind and so close to me with something like this. And she mentioned we'd go to St. Anthony Cemetery, get more information, but on a day like this, we do not want to go down there.
No, we don't want to be outside if we don't have to. Well, we thank you for doing this with us and for bringing the pictures. That was great. So